Hello and welcome to another workshop. This one is bereavement and preparing children for bereavement in early years and foundation stage. This is an hour's workshop and I'm just going to talk you through who I am and then go through some interventions and strategies for you. So my name is Andrew Whitehouse and I deliver training, workshops, conference presentations. I'm also a forensic special educational needs disability consultant, so I provide expert witness work in the courts. And when it's a special educational needs and disability case, and I also have delivered a few high-profile courses and workshops, including a TEDx from disability to superpowers and a Bamford lecture creating autism-friendly audiology clinics. I've got some quite high-profile clients, including Bishop Grosseteste University, University of Lincoln, Cognos, Harlow Education Consortium, and several others. One thing that I don't do much is bereavement work. I may be called upon to do bereavement interventions and bereavement strategies maybe once a year in my normal work, and as you can possibly imagine, at the moment I'm being called upon to do quite a considerable amount more. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. I am always open to people being in touch with me and wanting to have conversations with me. Often when we run a workshop, it raises as many questions as it does answers. So please feel free to get hold of me. I'm available at Facebook, which is Andrew Whitehouse at People First Education. I'm on Twitter at Andrew WSEN. It's probably the easiest one to get hold of me on. I'm on Instagram at Andrew WSEN. And I'm on LinkedIn, Andrew Whitehouse, with loads of letters after his name. And you can email me, andrew@peoplefirsteducation.com. And my web presence is peoplefirsteducation.com. So, strange days indeed. You may well be watching this during the COVID-19 crisis. The coronavirus crisis, or you may be watching it afterwards, but it's certainly being filmed during that period. As I said earlier, bereavement interventions is not something I get called on to do a lot. However, it is something that I'm trained to intervene on. Previously, I might get something maybe once a year. At the moment, I'm being asked quite a considerable amount. One of my specialist areas is autism. And when we work in autism, one of the things we have to do is explain things clearly, slowly, and explicitly. This particular workshop is for early years and foundation stage, which, as I'm sure you understand, is a very similar criteria. Clearly, slowly, and explicitly. So that's the approach I've taken to this. If you've seen any of my other workshops in the past, you'll be aware that I often use lots and lots of images. When putting this one together, I really didn't feel that bits of clip art and stock photos were appropriate. I didn't feel that they reflected the sensitivity that I wanted to put across in this workshop. So so if you notice that there's only a few images on here, that's because that's how I felt it would come across the best. So I hope you understand that. COVID-19 taken an extraordinary number of lives worldwide. As we're filming this, I think we've just gone over the 20,000 mark in the United Kingdom. And, you know, I'm sure once you get round to watching this, it'll be considerably more severe. What's interesting about this is it's changed the dynamic about how children deal with grief. It's a numbers game. You, as a child, there's going to be there's going to be more opportunities, more instances rather, of children dealing with grief when we've got this huge amount of people dying all in one go. They're likely to become aware of somebody like that, and so it's resulted in many children being exposed to death earlier in their lives than possibly before. And bearing that in mind, it's highly likely that this is going to be one of their first experiences that they've ever had of a death. What we've also got to remember is, whilst COVID-19 is going on, the rest of the world is going on. So people are dying of other things. They're dying of long-term illnesses. They're dying in accidents and incidents. And this is all running alongside COVID-19. And the COVID-19 is not the exclusive cause of death at the moment. Although to watch the news and read the online newspapers and the BBC, you would obviously be much more aware of COVID-19. But there are other illnesses around, and they take lives in different ways, and I'm going to have to cover that for you as well today. I'm sure every single person of you out there is aware that a death in a family or close friends is a hugely traumatic experience. Now, what I'm going to try and do with this workshop is I'm trying to split this up over long-term illness and short-term illness and almost instant death. So if we've got someone who's been long-term ill in a family, then you might have more opportunities to prepare for that person's ultimate passing. And so I'm going to look at that today in this workshop, and some of the things that we can do about that, some nice do's and don'ts for you. Obviously, sometimes there's going to be minimal or no preparation time. When the COVID-19 is hitting some people really hard, and before you know what's happened, they've lost their lives. In other cases, we're having people who have COVID-19 who maybe are suffering with something like cancer or something like that long term, and it's the COVID-19 taking them quite quickly at the end. And of course, in other cases, there are people that are just long-term ill. So, we're going to have to look at those different areas and those different processes of people approaching their final days. There was an interesting thing that I deliver workshops for a local autism parent support group where I live, and the gentleman that runs this support group, I've been delivering these workshops for him for many years, and he once stood up and he said, Andrew talks about lots of things, but the key message that Andrew is always delivering is communication. I'd never really thought of it like that, but certainly today is all about communication. It's communication between family and child and potentially the person who is ill. It's family and friends of the child, family and school, anyone that the child is coming into contact with. It's also it's also the case that if you keep a child in the loop, if you talk to things, they're going to get over things or have a better recovery than if you try to keep things secret. And so we want to keep talking, we want to keep communicating on that. Maybe secret's not the word, but to just not talk about this stuff, to keep it in. Really, your children need to know about this, and it's part of dealing with death, is part of child development. If it's an unexpected bereavement, it's very quick. We're not just dealing with grief, we're dealing with shock. And, you know, and again, any of you out there, I know I have experienced very close friends that you go to bed one night, you get up the next morning, you get a phone call and so-and-so's passed away, you know, in whatever instance. And that, of course, we're dealing with shock as well as the grief. There's no preparation time. So again, we need to be looking at that. Let's look at preparation time if it's there. Let's assume somebody's long-term ill and the things you can do. One of the things you can do is make sure that that child spends time with that person. Maybe with your support, they can send emails, letters, texts, postcards. Maybe with support, they can take photographs. You know, have that contact with that person. Now, what is interesting is with small children, you can, of course, if there's minimal or no preparation time, you can still carry out these strategies. There's nothing to stop you drawing a picture for a person who's passed away with your child, or writing a card or a letter. This is a great way of offloading. So, you know, in either instance, you can do these things, and you can say goodbye after the event. And so that's worth remembering, that it's not just for those people, you know, that are still with us that we would be doing this. Grieving is not only about death. Grieving can begin whilst the loved person is, loved one is terminally ill. You know, we are grieving the fact that we at some point are going to lose that person, and again, we have to be mindful, in the true sense of the word, of having that moment and enjoying, if possible, if at all possible, if the person's not too ill, to spend those last times with that person and being joyful in the fact that that person is still there. And so this is this is something which you might think is quite tricky for little ones, but you know, it is quite acceptable and a good strategy to talk to your little ones about how that person isn't going to be there all the time. And so, you know, you can share feelings, you can share information, even medical information, at an understandable age and level appropriate way. You can talk about that. You can give reassurance to that child. And you can talk about, you know, talking about memories and other things that stimulate you about that person. Biggest problem we've got, of course, at the moment is, or one of the biggest problems we've got at the moment is, that person may not be with you. And if it's during the COVID-19 crisis, as is when I'm speaking now, you may, if they don't live in your house, you may well not have the opportunities to spend time with them, actually face to face, have a cuddle, that sort of thing. I'm going to talk about that as well. Children, like anyone else, they want to remember their friends, they want to remember their relatives, and those that they've lost. And obviously, talking about those lost relatives and friends is crucially important, because, you know, that's how you keep people alive and in your mind, you know. So they will often ask very difficult questions throughout the process of grieving. Is you know, even some quite curt questions. I've heard instances of where children go, is he still alive? When's he going to hurry up and die? And things like that. And you know, these are the kind of questions children will ask. But obviously, your job is to take those questions seriously, and your job is to answer them as honestly and as level appropriate as you possibly can. Children are really clever. Children know. Children will see through you like nobody else will see through you. And if they, you know, even if they don't look like things are bothering them, they know when things they know when things are not as they normally are. They will see through that, and they'll understand when something's not quite right. So do talk to them about what's happening. You may well have to be the instigator of what is happening, and you may well have to start the conversations, because they may not have those abilities to ask the questions that you want to, you know, to ask the questions, to get the information that they need. It's a process that's unfamiliar to them, and therefore you have to you know, do the lion's share of the work with that. Okay, you need to talk to him, her, in a language that they understand by using straightforward words or phrases. Now, some of the guidance I've seen out there is often things like use words like death or dying or dead and things like that. I think for some, I would tend to disagree with that, and I would be looking at more gentle language that you've maybe you've had to explain in the first instance, but but is a far more gentle language. So we want to be less harsh with young people. So some of the phrases I like are passed away. I will be using throughout this workshop is gone away or going away. You would obviously have to preempt that by letting them know that gone away and going away actually means not coming back. So that's an important one. You may have religious beliefs. So if you are the belief that your loved one is going to reincarnate, or that they're going to go to heaven, or that kind of thing, then that's the sort of language you want to be using. But once you've spoken to your child, it's a good idea to go back to them and say, have you understood this? Do you know? And this is, you know, ask them pertinent questions. Tell me what you think is going to happen in the most gentle way. If time allows, best way to deliver the news is slowly and in small chunks. I mean, we don't want a situation whereby somebody's long-term ill and then you just say, oh, they died. And you know, they've got that shock to the system. You know, just you can put that across as if they're planning to go away, them going away. You can talk about any pain or discomfort that person is in, and the fact that that will ease their pain. Their going away is their way of feeling better. So there's lots of ways you can do it. This is all built around your own personal, cultural and family belief system, but you need to deliver it as gently and as slowly as you possibly can. Sometimes the child will not want to talk about things. You know it yourself. How many times have you had a difficult day at work and you come home and somebody says to you, how was work today? I don't want to talk about it. Just forget it. I don't want to talk about it. It's human nature for a lot of people. Some of us, we like to get it out there and we like to discuss this. Children are no different. Children are there, and they will either want to talk about this, they will ask lots and lots of questions, and that's fine, or they'll really just internalize this in their own way. They will come when they're ready. You have to, though, make sure that that open-armed policy is there with you, so when they are ready to come to you, you're there and you're waiting. So please, even if they don't want to talk, you can approach them and say, I get, you know, I understand you don't want to talk at the moment. When you're ready, I'm here. I'll talk to you about it, so that they don't feel isolated and they don't feel frightened to talk about this stuff. It's quite scary stuff, and we want to make sure that they know that there's somebody there, there's a lifeline for them to talk to. Let them know it's okay to be upset and to cry when something sad happens. If it's a family member, maybe you'll cry together. This is another thing that we need to get across there, that often grief is not in isolation. So I'm here telling you how to help a child deal with the death of a grandparent while you're there trying to deal with the death of a parent, And so maybe that shared grief is something you want to do. Maybe you don't have to be the strong one, and maybe modeling for that child how to behave, how you behave, what is socially acceptable and emotionally acceptable in those circumstances. You're doing the same thing, you're feeling the same things as that child, and it's really, really worth sharing that. They might want to talk about what they're feeling, and you might express back to them that how you feel, and that opening up of how you feel might give that child some prompts to be able to say, yeah, that's how I feel too. They need to know the subject's open. If they don't know the subject's open, they may feel isolated and in a position where, even though it may not be true, they feel that they are unable to share. So the general advice is be honest with children, and I would add to that, be open with children. Have a completely open policy with your children. Okay. Now, these are difficult times, and depending on health, proximity, it may not be possible to spend time with a friend or relative making a memory box or book with them. And so I want to talk about making memory boxes. Let me just check something. Yeah, okay, I was just double checking something there. So I want to talk about making a memory box, but before we do that, we have to be aware that you might not always be in a position during this COVID-19 crisis. Obviously, being in touch with people is a lot more difficult, than it has been in the past, and it will be again, I hope. But if somebody's ill and they're in hospital, chances of you being able to do regular visits into a hospital are pretty slim. So that proximity, they may not live with you. It may be someone who lives far away. So it may not be possible to spend time with them. Now, I want to be talking about making memory boxes or books with them. This might be one of those situations where you might need to do that with the support or parent giver via online or video chat. There's lots and lots of ways of doing that. I'm keeping in touch with people with WhatsApp and Instagram and things like that to get those conversations going. If that person is living alone and is struggling with care, you may need to put something else in place, like taking photographs and literally physically posting them out to them. But actually making the memory box or the memory book, you might want to make that with a caregiver. This gives you the opportunity to actually prepare it in advance. So you could gather up resources for this and talk them through with your child before sharing them with the friend or the relative. And that's quite a helpful way of doing things, because we can get those difficult conversations and those heightened emotions out in the open before sharing with that loved one. So that is a little bit of preparation that you can do, and it's one benefit of preparation. Ideally, we want them to be able to talk with the person, if that person is still with us, has the time, has the capacity to have those conversations. However, it is a good opportunity for the child to talk about that person. As we get older, a lot of us talk about people from our past who are no longer with us. I know I do it. I'm sure many of you do it. And there are many cultures and belief systems that are built around talking about people from the past. And so, you know, this is giving that child that way to get it out there. One of the things we're really trying to ensure is at the end of this, that we want to ensure good mental health for that young person and their ability to deal with situations like this. We also want them to be able to personalize this thing. So a memory book could be something like a scrapbook. You can choose what goes in there. You can, you know, you can make it a whole process, almost a distraction. So if you've got toys that were given to you by that person and you maybe still want to play with those toys, take some photos, get them printed off, get them put in your scrapbook. You know, we can do all that stuff. We may have things that belong to that person, a piece of jewelry or a key or an old wallet or something like that, and that we could put in the memory box that we can bring out at appropriate times and enjoy those memories. And it's quite important often to say, you know, not just a thing that they own, but a thing that's got a connection with both of the people, the child and the person that's passed away. And not to forget, of course, that that person that passed away may well be a child. Okay. While making the box together, the child will have an opportunity to look back on the happy times and will be able to return to their box for comfort when they feel sad and are missing the deceased. And are missing the deceased. This is a thing. This is a long-term piece of a long-term resource that we want people to return to, and it does create a connection, and it also creates a talking point. One of the things that I would say to you is, if you see your child with their memory book, with their memory box, whatever it is they've got, or some other thing that they've done, some other thing that they've created, you see them with it, take the opportunity to go up and say, oh, what are you doing today? Oh, is this such and such? You know, is this to remind you of so and so and such and such? This is really helpful stuff. What I would say is, if that child doesn't want to talk, step away. If you can involve both the person, you know, if that person hasn't passed away yet, and if you can involve the child with the person, then that's fine too, because then they have the opportunity to connect with each other and connect in a way that they are sharing their memories. And that's a nice thing to carry forward, a good thing to carry forward, that they can also not just have the memory box, the memories, but the memory of making the memory box in the book or the scrapbook or whatever it is you've done. Okay. If the friend or relative is incoherent, which could well be the case, if that friend or relative is incoherent, explain to them, though, that even though that person is ill or maybe tired, they're still there and listening and sharing. And I mean, we know this to be often true, but it might not be obvious to the child that, you know, that person is coherent and is still involved with that conversation. So you need to talk about that. And you might say it's when you're a bit sleepy sometimes and you're there, it's a bit like that, where you're still taking in what people are saying to you, but you don't feel the energy to respond. And so we can talk about it in that way, obviously in a way that brings it down to a child's level. As I said before, if that person is already passed away, then this strategy can be completed with a close adult and caregiver. It doesn't need to be complicated. Look at this here. On the screen, we've got a picture of a bunch of keys, a few coins in a little tray made out of lollipop sticks. That's perfectly appropriate, perfectly good, and you know, that I would say that's a fantastic little memory box that the child can keep in their bedroom or keep in a special place in the house or wherever. Simple, but a really nice little tactile, visual memory that they can enjoy of that person. Okay. Does it need to be finished? Does it need to be finished? I don't think it does. I think it's something that can be added to through life. And I think, once we get back to sort of visiting relatives and friends, you may find that auntie or uncle has found something around the house and you've said, oh, look, I found granddad's tie pin, or I found a button. I've got a button from cardigan here, or if it's of a child, this is this child's little this is this child's cuddle toy or something like that, and you can add to it, and then that again gives that child the opportunity to bring those conversations out and exercise a little bit of self-initiated therapy, which has been originally brought on by that toy. It can be, it also can be a bit much. Building a memory box is fine. It's a really good idea. It's a fantastic resource, but it might be too much for the adult and the children to do in one sitting. It's quite a big thing. So you might get to a point, where they just can't take it anymore. And when that point is. The trick is not to push it. It's not a job. It's not a job to be done. It's supposed to bring a little bit of joy in a difficult time for that person. And if it's too much, then it's not doing its job. Push it out of the way, bring it back at a later time. And and again, you can have that conversation and say to the child, are you ready to have a little look at this now? I don't, and if they say no, that's fine. We'll come back to it later. And if they really don't want to engage with this, again, we don't want to be forcing that. It's an emotional journey, and as adults, we have to be the ones that guide that child and support that child along the way through that journey. Okay. Before we go on and look at visual and social stories, I would like to just give you the opportunity to have a little think about what you would put in a memory box. What sort of things could go in a memory box. You maybe have better ideas than me. So what I'd like you to do, if you're working with somebody, that's a really nice way to bounce ideas off each other. You may actually be working with a young child at the moment who's experienced a bereavement. What sort of things have you got? Anything that can go in that box? And that book. You don't have to part with things. If they're making a memory book, you can take photos and you can get the pictures to them. So there's all sorts of things you can do. But just take a few moments there to talk about what you think could go in a memory box, or indeed a memory book. If you pause now. Okay. Thank you very much. What I'd like you to do is to send over some of your ideas. It's at Andrew WSEN, so that I can share that with future delegates. It's always interesting. When I run a training course, I generally take away pretty much as I put in, and so please do share any ideas that you have. Now, I've had a long think about social stories. Social stories, the way I make social stories, they can be quite short. So what I've done, I'll just get my structure for social stories out here. And so my social stories are done in 4 sentences. Sometimes other people I will this is. So you might have picture of a child picking his nose is one that I've used a lot. Someone else feeling sick. The child using a tissue, and a thumbs up. That's one that I use quite a lot. I think dealing with death, dealing with a bereavement, I think this might be a little bit too flippant. We don't want a social story that says sometimes people get ill and pass away, other people feel sad about this. I will make a memory box this is going to make me feel better. It just feels wrong. It just feels completely wrong. So what I've actually done here is I've put together an actual story. It's only a draft, and obviously every single one is going to be different. And you know, I just want to give you this for a little bit of inspiration. It will definitely need editing. There is no such thing as a social story that works for everybody, or not that I think. You always need to start at the beginning, you know, and you and to meet the needs of the individual child. So please do not present this as I've given it to you, but use it as an idea, as a structure. This is a story of Richard and his grandfather. Okay. This is the story of a boy called Richard and his grandfather. One day Richard found out that his grandfather had become very ill and had to get ready to go away. Richard was very sad that grandfather had to go away. He loved him very much and will miss him, being there to play. Richard also knew that it is good to go away when you are too ill. Okay, so as you've seen there, I've used the terminology to go away. Other ones I've seen is, you know, go to heaven and things like that. That's fine. You base it on your own personal belief system. I would, if possible, if you've got some photographs, I would put them with this. Again, I did sort of toy with grabbing some pictures off the internet, but I thought that that would be a little bit inappropriate, and so I haven't. But do, you know, do use actual contextual personalized photographs. I think that's a great idea. When grandfather does go away, Richard will miss him. But this is okay, because he, that is Richard, can look at his memory book and box as much as he likes. This will be like being with grandfather. It's okay to feel sad when someone goes away. It's good to remember special people when they are gone. Now, what we're looking at here is, again, we've consolidated the term going away. I think I've probably said it 4 or 5 times already in 2 pages. This is fine. We've also consolidated, we've put there a positive, that there is the memory book, there is the memory box, that you can go and engage with that. The line, this will be like being with grandfather, that might not be appropriate to some, you know. You might want to put something in like, this will be a good way to remember grandfather, or that this will be a little bit like being with grandfather. That's all fine. You do it your own way, but you know, this is a good starting point. I would recommend you follow that format, because it's, you know, it's got a beginning, it's got a middle, it's got an end, it's got what's happening, what we can do, and what the result of that is. And I think that's a good structure for children, a good story type structure. You might want to do it a lot looser than, you know, you might do it loosely, but generally that's what you would do. Wherever possible, like any social story, like any visual story, like any 5-point scale or anything like that, where you can, you know, I would like you to be able to get the child to contribute as much as you possibly can. Try not to put words in their head. I bet you feel sad, don't you? I bet you feel, you know, don't do that. Get them to give it to you, and just work with their words. Okay. It might be possible that you can get the child to draw some pictures and put some illustrations in there. Fantastic. Pictures are a really good way of communicating complex feelings and emotions, and drawing things to get it out there. Absolutely fantastic. Not a problem at all. I think that's probably a really good idea. And you could have a collection of pictures and drawings and photographs in there. It really doesn't matter. You're not trying to create a beautiful published text. You're trying to create a resource to help a young person to to be able to deal with the death of a loved one. Some other things you can be thinking of, some other things you can do. Keep talking about the dying or deceased person. Yeah, again, I've said this before, but keep talking, get it out there. It's really good therapy. And if you, as a parent or a professional, have a memory of that person, then please do, you know, bring it up in conversation. It really is a good positive thing to do for that child. And you want the child to do the same. You want them to be able to bring it up in conversation. You know, we don't want phrases going around like, oh, don't be morbid, or that sort of thing. It's not a taboo subject. It's a, you know, death is part of life and life process, and we want it out there, and we want it talked about. So please, whilst you are talking, don't discourage the child from doing the same thing. It's not a taboo subject, as I've said. Okay. Right, back to keep talking again. One of the most positive things you can do is to help, to help a child prepare. One of them, keeping talking is one of the most positive things you can do to help a child prepare for or to navigate loss, is to focus on sharing memories together. So again, we're talking about that. You may even, you know, there are lots of things you can do. You can visit a place and say this was that person's favourite place. You can put on a TV show. You know, oh, we're watching Peppa Pig. Little Sally used to like Peppa Pig, didn't she? We can do that kind of stuff. And by bringing those things up in conversation, by reminding the child of those things, those shared experiences, you'll be helping the child to see the bonds that humans have with their loved ones. You'll be giving them good attachment opportunities. And again, I strongly recommend that in alongside this, I would go back and I would look at the attachment disorder workshop for EYFS that I've put together. We want those connections to be with that person long after they've gone. You know, these people were really there, and they were really friends, and they were really family, and we genuinely were close. And even though that they're gone now, we can still enjoy those precious moments. Nobody can take those moments away. They're ours to keep. Okay. If you have time together, collect stuff. If you don't have photos, take photos. If the person is gone, then collate things that you've got. You know, be gathering things up, be putting things together, and putting things putting things together in your memory box, and you might want to put sort of memories of birthdays and things like that together, family events. You might have video footage, and you know, so you may want to put together a presentation on a computer that they can watch, like a little movie, like a little slideshow, something like that. This is really helpful stuff. Again, strongly recommended that you get those things together. On the subject of collecting, if it is someone within the home and they have lots of things, then after an appropriate amount of time, I would say in most cases less time than more, I would be talking about getting rid of those things, taking those, or a lot of those things, like clothing, or it might be toys or things that they, you know, that the rest of the family can't use. But again, be talking about the benefit that those things could do to others, and how that person would want somebody else to have these things and to benefit from these things, and to share, but at the same time to simultaneously be sharing some of those resources, sharing some of those resources with the people left behind, some of those things with the people left behind. And you know, that's quite normal. But obviously what we don't want to be doing is to be in a position of gathering up stuff and hoarding stuff and holding on to loads and loads of stuff. Okay. These physical items that we've kept, that we've collected, they will help the child connect with the deceased person in the days, weeks and years after their death. I bet you've all got things, every now and again you open a drawer and you pull something out and you go, oh gosh, remember that person? I really cared about that person. You know, this is what we want. This is what we want for those children, is to care for those people, care for those things, and to be given joy every time they see those items, to have that sense of joy. Keeping talking again, it is very, very important to let other significant people in the child's life know. If you are a parent, then make sure the school knows. If you're a school, make sure other members of staff know. If you're a school, if you're a parent or a relative, make sure other relatives know, make sure neighbours know, make sure the appropriate people know, and those people that child have frequent contact with, and that's going to, that makes it helpful. In as much as, if nothing else, we don't want people, what we call, putting their foot in it, do we? So, we don't want people saying inappropriate things. So do make sure that all the key people know those people who it's appropriate to know. Other things that come up in conversation are very, very tricky, but you need to talk about this. You might consider this an unhealthy or morbid interest in the details of death, but in the child's world, they're just trying to make sense of things. So they might be asking about funeral arrangements. They might ask where the body goes before the body is buried or cremated. What happens when the body is cremated? What happens when the body is buried? This is really hard stuff, really, really difficult stuff. But you have to answer as honestly and appropriately to that person. And when I say honestly and appropriately, there are some of the less pleasant details that you would obviously leave out, but we do need to share that information. Those children need that information. That's why they're asking for it. So please do discuss this with them when they ask. It's something, it's something it's going to help them make sense of the world. You can be as honest as you can without frightening them, is, I think, the main guidance that I can give you there. The concept of a cremation, that's a really tricky concept. But you've got to be careful not to leave them more confused than they were in the first place. The other particular issue that we've got is, as at the moment we're in the COVID-19 lockdown while I'm delivering this, you may well still be. If that is the case, we have issues around people going to funerals. I've been looking at certain places up and down the country, and there seem to be very different rules and regulations in different areas. And I think I was reading about one city where there's a maximum of 6 people can go to a funeral. This is obviously to do with social distancing. I think in predominant amount of cases, the proportion, the most amount of cases, young children tend not to go to funerals, but some families do find that comforting to take their children to funerals. You might well be having to explain to them why people can't go, and so that brings up even more difficult concepts, because obviously, particularly if that person has died of the COVID-19 and because of the COVID-19, it can make it a very frightening concept. And you might need to talk about other issues, such as how we stay safe during COVID-19, and why that is one of the reasons why lots of people can't go to family funerals. Okay, so what we're saying is the child may need to make sense of what is happening around them in the aftermath of death, and by answering those questions, you'll be helping them to make that sense. That's what we're trying to do. Okay. finally, just like to finish you off with this, it's vitally important to acknowledge the child's feelings in a sensitive matter. And there's three really key pieces of guidance here. Let him talk when he wants to talk. Be quiet when he wants to be quiet, and play and laugh when he feels ready to do so. And that third one is actually, we've not covered that, but you know, if you see a child enjoying themselves, a person close to you, and you may have just lost a very close loved one, they're a child. They need to play, they need to laugh. And if they feel the need to do that, that's something that you need to be encouraging with that young person. A couple more things I wanted to share with you. In my spare time that I have, I am involved in as a scout leader, and the scouts have sent out some really good guidance on dealing with bereavements. Obviously, there are going to be young people who are not returning to scouts because of COVID-19, and there are going to be leaders and helpers that are not going to be returning to scouts because of COVID-19. This particular resource covers both of those areas. I looked at it, it's fantastic. I've taken none of it for this training today, so it's all new stuff. There's all extra stuff that you can use. If you can get, I'm hoping that you will get a PDF electronically, electronic PDF of these slides, so you can put notes on them. If you've got electronic copy, then obviously you should be able to click on that link in the PDF and have a look at these resources. If you have any difficulties looking at those resources, then please do get in touch with me, and I'll find out another way of getting that information to you. And again, as I said earlier, we did that little workshop earlier that I liked, that I was asking you what sort of memories could go in a memory book or box. If you could do that, and please send it to me in order that I can share ideas with people in the future, and we can get some, get some really solid and concrete interventions out to people. Thank you very much for listening, and remember to stay safe, and I'll speak to you soon.